It's really great to see everybody come in a formation screen in direct location line settings. To understand location adaptation is understand location into mainframe box frame. Mainframe box frame. Okay, so there's a mainframe of everything's applications. You wire your circuits lines and screen lines adaptation location your system through extension calculations. This points lines and divisions. Okay, so today was the correlation setting the track lines. Very powerful what you guys have done through foundations of primer. But to understand your primer is to understand you through center. Okay, let me say that again. To understand your primer is to understand you through center. How to operate your system is really to understand how to communicate your setting of speed and acceleration and Mach. Understanding your magnitudes, longitudes, latitudes, ratios, proportions, streaming, okay? Understanding your connections to your coordinates, understanding your travels, understanding your mechanisms, understanding your operation, okay? Understanding your grounds, your powers, your atmospheres, understanding your elements, okay? Understanding everything that you can imagine, because that imagination equals phenomenon. Phenomenon comes in all ways and forms, guys. Phenomenon is all line communications and memory. Coming in that track line comes into levels of observation, coming into intent and influence locations of manipulation. There's so many ways to look at yourself and see yourself through vision, right? It's knowing exactly what reality you want to be in traction of consciousness. Your awareness is all of the setting. You set the tone, you set the correlation, you set the tracks, you set your divisions and all calculation modifications, all right? So we work with the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, okay? Now you just have to understand how to basically get into folding, okay? So this is all called high center interference or retriangulation into triangulation interface. So retriangulation line screen interference is understand location system where you basically understand how to fold a piece of paper. You're getting into modification in your settings and travel. Okay, so starting with that correlations of tracks gets you in a line communication system, all levels of traction. Okay, it modifies you in all calculations. Okay, directing your line settings puts you in all lines of communication. Okay, so we have that Zoom today in calculations on line settings in position. We're going to go a little bit more into that. I want you guys to understand lines of formation. Get your provision cycles, high triangle line connections, all levels. So your attractor's communication surface is all levels of angles and points in track communication. Directing modification line screens or anything through allocate timelines gets you an all center calculation. Okay. How you get in your line connections to your system is really understanding more levels of you. How you came to basically understand yourself is through all levels of obstacles of you, right? So you want to take those obstacles and turn it into an opportunity. Those opportunities comes in all ways and forms and applications. Okay. Getting yourself in traction is really understanding how to modify your settings. How do I understand this, General? How do I understand that, General? Well, it's all inside you. Now's the time for you to understand what that means, right? Because it's a meaning to its meaningless of its meaning, which is the truth narrative. Which truth narrative comes into a false narrative, right? So understand that equals correlations, attractions of teleportation, of formation, togetherness, okay? Collaboration, energy, vibration, frequencies, harmonics, communications, partnership, interface, okay? Togetherness, one, all process of one. So it's putting everything all together in one. And then mind through travel. You're constantly traveling, right? So where you're traveling to It's all you through determination. Okay? Where are you traveling? Okay? Not where you want to travel, because you're already there. Okay? Your memory is already in setting. Your memory isn't already in altered state locations. Okay? It's a life force that's in its position of all calculation that's coming back to you as an inner child. Okay? So this is processing you more and more now in set locations. Getting into that track line connection to all levels of its program. Okay? Position your settings and travel. Okay, so if you guys want to come in like calculating centers into Space-Time Creator, you've got to communicate to your computer framings, your mainframes, and application, your phones, or anything location your systems of every single time you come on live with General. Okay, now there's a 5-track line conditions. There was 4, now there's 5, which means there's that calculation of clearing call that's coming in signal, right? Modification system comes in tractions. How do you understand that? It's through frequency, right? Because we correlate high track lines in position to our body mechanisms, position locations, it amplifies. It amplifies, okay? The amplifications and settings of travel put you all levels of operation surface and set locations to your settings. So it's very powerful when you come into that track locations and measure. Measure, scale, balance, setting locations, setting calculations to its system. All right, so get into the files and communications of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's start with 5 lines. Okay, 5 communications, right? All right, so you got indicate line settings. Let's go strip circulation setting and travel. Okay, now that's 1 file in a box frame. Okay, now point tracks align provision line cycles and specifications of clockings. Sequence location settings of 24, sets lines of 48, 72, and 144 track location. Right? You are in the center operation. Okay? So if you understand that, then you understand yourself through face recognition. Okay? So there's so many ways of looking at this. To understand the set line calculation setting to a system is its primer of its setting, which is all center of its operation. Center locations, right? So getting in the position line centers, we take the correlation setting attractions and positions. We take the truth narratives, equal location of false. Okay, so teleportation string, line condition of false. Says correlation to the center correlation line, track line, it's the highest interference, and 45-degree indication of travel. Okay, direct lines, position locations, mainframe. Says locations. Okay, set locations, outer frame. Outer frame, okay, in position location, inner frame, mainframe. Okay, so there's inner line charge in line calculation setting, line conditions. This is a line condition of a space frame as that location, which is your foundation graph. Now that sets lines all communication line system. So you have inner lines of space and track locations. Okay, so there's all different ways of looking at it in point directions. 4 track line conditions, all levels of provision in set locations. Okay, so it's very powerful once you understand how this is all connected inside connections, all through travel. Setting correlation lines of platforms and track line connections. Okay, 2 lines of tracks, 3 line provisions, 4 line settings, and calculation your cerebral. Cerebral cortex is line screen interference and track calculation point centers. Okay, all through traction. Okay, so it's interesting when you understand the magnetic cloud. What is the magnetic cloud? It's the Skynet SkyGrid line connection your settings. That's what gets you in your files communications. So let's go above signal in calculation setting. Start their locations, right? So what's below in set line conditions is what's above in set line conditions, right? Because it just goes on a continuous force line in setting, right? So in that track line calculation setting, you have your infinity 8s and set locations, right? Track is correlation setting to track lines. Getting to higher line position location, you're coming into your clouds. Set locations. Okay. So all information is given to you and track locations to your Earth and set connections. That's how it goes in setting, right? So in position, this is you in the center. Okay, on your Earth perception screen and direction. Okay. So you got position location of center lines, archetype location centers, panel communication center location. Okay. So this is you and your position line connection. Okay. And so you have to really understand how this all works, guys. How the correlation setting attractions comes in position. As soon as you come in levitation, you're in the center correlations of grounds in space, which is really, really amazing. Coming in that track line connections and set locations from here to here, right? And then you travel, okay, through your sim. Modification starts off the higher self, track locations, but the sim is the navigator and set locations. Okay. All right, so there's a lot of interference. It's totally fine. Getting provision lines as centers and travel and communication of programs. Get your direct signals into calculation. Okay. Motivate yourself and try to understand how to communicate to that setting. Okay. Try to understand yourself inside more and levels and so much communications, your electrical system, your binary system, your transistors, your resistors, your capacities, your capacitors, volumes and volumes of you inside, right? There's so much data that you come into, okay, on a 24 cycle and set location. Okay. These are the things you have to look at because this basically puts you in all levels of programs in your center correlation setting attractions. Puts you all levels of communication in all directions. Okay. This formulates all levels of you, and this helps you to guide you of where you need to go next, right, through your travels. But this is the basic ground calculation setting, right? Higher self, the avatar, and the sim, right? Higher self controls the earth line. The avatar controls the space line, the geometric operation of design location modifications, teleportation, and the calculation of sim controls everything in line connections, okay, of its settings, hallways, tractions, divisions, headings, anything in that track location of higher levels of space, okay? But the provision line in cycles and communication surface is really understanding your foundation graphs of 12. We already know that in correlation centers attractions, right? In that directions. Get you all levels of modification. Center lines of zeros and ones and twos, and threes and fours. Sets lines of 5, 6, 7, and 8. 8 locations, right? Now, turn that position line centers high interference. Sets correlations of truth, equals locations and line settings. Operation set location line system of false, all right? Truth and false narrative, right? Sets locations into false, sets locations into false. Okay, so this is about understanding how you can go through binary and retraction at the same time. So you guys have to understand how to go forward and backwards in set location, right? Right? Once it gets to a certain frequency, it creates its hologram, it creates a structure, it creates a design, it creates its primer. Okay, but the primer is already there in setting. It's for you to put it together. Okay, the faster you go through your settings, through your tractions and your retractions and your reprovisions and your recycles and recalculations and remodification, everything comes in a formation locations of balance. Okay, so you go truth equals locations into aligned centers of false narrative, and false narrative. So that's 2 off switches, right? So again, position locations on and then off, and then on, right? So you have to understand how to come into your setting location settings of flux, your flux capacitor, and set locations of trouble. Okay, so it's really in position your settings Once you understand the truth narrative and the false narrative, location of zeros and position of eights, that's a foundation graph calculation stream and the position of the panels, splits the anomalies and track locations of setting. Okay. So, and then you just go up. So it's all levels of your emotional system, right? In track locations. So you are in charge of everything that you voice out in setting interactions. So in position locations, now we go in line calculation, line center, it's a 3. 3 is truth. And we got truth narrative and truth narrative. And then we got false narrative and we got truth narrative. And then basically, you basically get into formation lines and entire calculations of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you're just going, that's all you're doing, right? So what you're doing is you're coming your line calculation setting into formation locations to your system. So when you get to that setting, it's false, and then we go into truth, then we go into truth, then we go into truth, then we go into calculations high center false, and then we go into truth. Okay, it's that position. All through. So this is how you come into your flux capacitor. Communication lines, screens, and line centers, your voice grid position of travel lines, guys. You really have to start identifying yourself and everything inside you that reflects everything outside you. And set locations. Okay. In positions, you have to understand how to formulate line condition your binaries. Like I said, turn on an on switch and turn off a switch. Okay, so it's that location line system. 2 off switches, 1 on switch. Okay, so that's two narratives, 2 negative narratives over positive. Okay, 2 negative narratives, okay, over positive, okay, of pi. Okay, 2 negative, okay, over, okay, positive of pi. All right. So I want you to really understand how to formulate all this interactions, guys, to really get in position your truth narratives and your all levels of your false narratives. This is going to get you a boundary. Now that boundary implements its position travel lines and implementation. This is where you come into replicas. Now replica is position your dormants and set lines. It's your DNA tractions, which is your calculations to your system. Okay. So in positions the replicants, in setting the travel communication as program lines, your tracker systems have to be in the same position of travel and calculations, which means they all have to be going in the same direction. They have to be going all in the same direction. They have to be all in the same direction. Okay? As long as they go in the same directions, they come into modification settings and all tractions. All levels of track location. What am I in position of? Figure 8. See? Figure 8. The rotation spin cycles are spinning in cycles. See? It's creating its anomalies in track line conditions. And if you look really, really close, you can see the track location line settings of 6, 9 equals lines of 8. 6, 9 equals 8. That's what's in traction. Okay? So in that formation line screen, once you understand how to use your systems or your binaries and your transistors and your resistors, everything gets a lot more easier to understand locations, right? So remember the platitude screen interference, how we go through line calculation settings, how you go into coloration lines of 1, skip lines anomaly. So this is basically time jumping in set location, right? Say correlation setting to track lines, time jumping. Okay. Set position, time jumping, and position locations, right? Waiting on signal, 2 operation line systems, right? 2 track location line position, right? So there's always different ways to connect your settings. This is levels of you getting into your command system, into your voice, okay? Let's correlate correlation setting to track lines. Let's go to lines of 4 equals lines of 3 in tractions, right? Okay, so we'll go in position line centers into 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so in that position, there's 1. Okay, so in position is false, in position of truth. Okay, so that's a formation. Formation is a coloration. Okay, formation is a coloration, all right? Teleportation is out of the equation. Okay, all right. So when you get into that settings, you have to really understand what the formation of coloration is, the configuration. Your configuration is you through tractions, right? So you got to know exactly what you're doing, all right? For example, when Gypsy is in position of portals and Stargate line screens, she's got to understand her direct signals to her truth and her false narratives, or where they're going in travel. Point lines of track in position location, center correlation line settings, high center interference, set lines of communication, all lines of communication, and travel. Point lines of setting high interference in position locations to wormhole and track location and high setting in its operation system of realms of communication. Okay? So we all have to understand how this all works. And the more you understand your binary, the more you understand the connections to your on and your off switch locations. So in channel communication lines at all levels of configuration is really understanding all lines of zeros and zeros and zeros and zeros and zeros. What does that mean in track location, high setting, and position location of center? That's the primer. So what you're doing is you're bringing this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this together. That's what you're doing. So correlation settings, one file, and set locations. Correlation line center location of another file, and set locations. Set location line centers of another file, and set locations. Right? Set location lines of another file, and set locations, and so on. Right? So it's all about understanding your files of communication that's coming to you through tractions, right? This opens up all communication in your settings, all through its information panels of correlation. Okay. Now the track calculation line interference, you have files and files and files. So there's data, okay, there's upgrade, okay, there's uploading, downloading, uplinking, okay, and upgrading. Okay. Now, all that position line centers comes in all track locations in one setting. Puts position line centers in position location in your system. Now, in that calculation line centers, it's all about understanding in position location. It doesn't matter what you use in set locations, they all come together. Box frame in travel, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Box frame in travel in a calculation line screen, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Sets position locations and line centers into uploading, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Sets locations into all calculation line system. Getting track lines to your setting line connection system is all levels of travel, 1, 2, 3, 4, through uploading and downloading and upgrading and uplinking your settings, all through travel calculation of point center. So what you're doing is you're bringing in position of center, okay, to understand location Wi-Fi, your satellites, and your rotation surface and set locations. So it's all line center. This is the primer. Okay. So once you understand that, you put all files together, it coordinates and comes into a point lines of track. 4 lines of setting, 4 lines of setting. They all have to be in a 4-line setting because it's a 24, 40, 872, and 144, because it won't stay in a position of traction, so TV reception line screens. Sets position to its calculation line screen line interference, especially when you're coming into 4 files of communication, seconds, minutes, and hours, and track locations. All levels of calculation. Now, putting line communication line setting is really understanding the formations of you and tractions, right? So I just want you to understand the files and the data ops that comes to you in line connections, all through formation. Okay? So once you get in that calculation stream interference, you get in position track lines. Now we have 4 line signals and set locations, right? Sets lines communication lines is 4 zeros. We take that track lines and that's position of truth and position locations into false narrative. Okay. Setting communication line interference, high calculation lines, screen settings, all calculation lines. So everything's in 4 sequence position panels, right? Position travel lines, 1, 2, and 3 set locations and settings, right? So in track lines, you always have to work with 4 and you always have to work 3 because that's your identification code line interference. That's in your position to a setting and projection. Position line calculation lines of 3. Okay, so that's that line calculation setting into false, into false, into truth. So you got 2 formations, 2 colorations, a configuration over 1 setting. Okay, now when you get your files and your data okay, of your processing load lines, screen lines, high center interference, or travel position of program setting location. It's like an X-ray line screen. It directs signals location system to your travel calculation line settings. So it's like a fax machine that comes to you and tracks this, right? But it comes from the cloud line. Now the cloud line center lines is communication setting, a center communication. Sets lines of course lines of setting into modifications and travel calculation to point centers. So it comes in a formation screen. Direct position lines of travels, 1, 2, and 3 set location. Okay. Sets position line centers, cross line screen set locations of 2 panels of operation surface and set location. Okay. Position lines of track line, all line centers and set location. Okay. So that's how you get your files and center calculations. Okay. All right. So as it comes in line signal, it crosses line setting and it gets bigger and bigger in position, all calculation modified. Indirect signals in calculation, all levels of log connections of configuration. Very powerful stuff in set location. Okay. So it's interesting how this is all set up, and how this is given to you is through its data, through its files, of its panels, of its operation system, through its configuration line screens. Pixel activation line screen interference puts position of travels in your line connection to its position of its program, puts lines of perceptions over pi in track line connections, all through set location. Okay. Getting that calculation line centers comes into a diamond core, shifts position of its programs and line connections to its setting in pixelation graphs, center correlation setting in travel. You guys are going, what's going on? Okay. So that's how you guys receive your energy screen lines and your primary line direct segregation of files and your datas from your uploading, downloading, uplinking, and upgrading systems in travel. Okay, very, very powerful stuff. Now this correlates calculation to its primer, which is the center. So you're bringing things in, okay? So that's what it is, you're bringing things in and then they go out, in and then out, in and then out, in and then out. And then once you get the balance and all calculation, modifications, screen lines, adaptation, surface, and triangulation, reset, position programs, in your perception, your line calculation, your primers, and your locations of your box frames, your main frames, your inner frames, your outer frames, your space frames, and track location of space, inner line calculation, position line centers, your Wi-Fi position of travel line changes, box centers, and set lines calculation of 4 lines of 3, and track location of provisions of all calculation of skynets and sky grids and position of panels, and set location and travel calculations. Okay, very powerful stuff. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing so far in traction? Position programs. It's very powerful when you understand what's coming to you through files of data. Okay. Through all setting calculation streamlines. Okay. Into your mainframe position, your primer. That's your primer right there in the center. So what you're doing is you're bringing it together, right? So it's an inline setting, right? So I really want you to understand how to use your primer, set location line system, travel calculation point lines, coming to track location of this settings and travel. Set position locations, time jump, time wait, all calculations, all levels, jump start, screen center hard interference. So the thing is, setting position your setting is really understanding you through track locations. Coming into the truth narrative to the false narratives, truth narrative, false, truth, false, false, truth. Coming to your flux. Your flux is all position locations. So putting lines of tune lines and negative lines of wire, overline communication setting, positive line connection line system over pi, tracks the set location your flux capacitor. So you're able to get in that communication. So when you're communicating with yourself or anybody else in that track lines, you're going you're going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So the process of your primary line screen comes into box location setting and travel. This is how it comes into correlation setting and mechanism set location setting. Okay, all through your cerebrum. Now, getting direct signal line connection line system and travel calculation point centers, we add configuration screen settings and travel, point lines of track, okay? Heat signature lines, screen set lines, and high position location of species. See a species? All right. Color the line screen to show you and position travel. Point lines of track, species lines. See airborne line communication at all line centers into heat signature screen settings and travel. There it is. Direct calculation line interference and position of travel lines, position of program lines, direct signals modification system. So it's really interesting when you see the plateaus of heat signature screen lines, high interference. Now you guys saw X-Men, right? Well, the correlation setting the track lines to its position, all through calculations. Okay? So if you understand that, and you're in that position locations, then you understand the colossal calculation streamlines. This directs lines calculation and position of programs. Now, modification line screen has an offline signal in line center and position with operation surface. Retriangulate the program line center high interference in a 45-degree angle and line condition cross line screen line connections. Position to its process of its dome and set location of travel. Sets lines of platforms and communication lines of three triangulation, reset position of programs and line setting high calculations. Point lines of track in line calculation setting to male and the female cycle and line condition setting of position. Mainframe traction set lines the earth line, sets location correlation settings of travel. Modification setting interference, XD thousands in the two track line connections of provision. Light signals comes in light settings, highest interference, ground centers, high in line rotation surface and triangulation reset position of programs. Direct modification line screen interference, sets position travel calculation point lines, plasma generation screens, direct location of cores, ether correlation line centers, and ferments over pi, triangulate reset position programs, space anomalies, and track line connections of high centers of time speed. Time speed position of patterns in line condition settings is all levels of correlation track lines of face recognition. Two online cell location node line connections. There's the face. Okay. Everything comes in a formation of a face, guys. Okay, which is used through correlation, which is your primary. Okay. All right, so setting position of travels, indirect signals, you have to understand how to modify all this through files of communication. Very powerful stuff, right? Seeing lines of communication lines of pixelation line screens, directing lines of communication in your system, collecting lines of waves. Directing lines of communication puts you levels of all track locations. How to see yourself is all levels of formation, right? Which is correlations to what? False narratives, right? Formation, color of formation, triangulation of formation, right? So when you get into higher levels and higher levels of the mind line, your frequency position of patterns change the alpha, delta, theta, omega, zeta, zeta, gamma, radiation line connection, all level calculation system because you had infinitive of frequencies. But you've got to get in your foundations, your 12s. You've got to get in your foundation, your 24s, your 48s, 72s, and 144s of clocking systems first before you get anything in position location. Your memories that correlates the correlation line calculation setting attractions of your positions of retention, putting you back in position travel lines. So track location lines, triangulation line connections, coloration line triangulations of 1, center lines of 0, 0, point lines of 1. So that's a triangulation, but that's a configuration of color, your location of communication, right? So, and you got two operations, bracket calculation lines, 2 points and center lines of 2 zeros, point lines of 1 in track locations, right? So that's a coloration lines of decimal, which is also false narrative. Okay, truth equals false, right? Overall calculating high interference is 1 ground line centers, high calculation settings, ground levels, and travel location. Okay. Mechanism of force is line signaling and know exactly what you're doing in perimeters and line calculation setting and track location system of communication. Okay, all through set location, guys, all through set location. See how it changes the formation screen? See that? See how you can change the frequency line condition your finger point line streams? See how direct locations into 2 panels correlation? So in that line setting, it gets a lot more easier and a lot more fun if you really understand the track line conditions, all levels, and it can change the platform again. See, it's bigger. See, it's bigger now, right? And it's bigger again. See, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. See, it's bigger now. See? So you have to really understand how to travel the mechanism line position of power. Power charge lines the center of communication. Directs modification lines of pi in 3 track line connection settings. Puts lines at all levels of operation line calculation setting, and you guessed it, in track location high position at all levels in all line rotation surface of face recognition. See the face? Boom. Right there. You're always the primer of face recognition. Okay, in all interaction. See? Face recognition. Face recognition. See? See how powerful that is? Boom! Face recognition. Okay? All right. So if you understand that, that's how you understand yourself. This is you through a box frame. This is you through a mainframe. Okay? So mainframe, box frame. Okay? So when you get in that correlation lines of tractions, you understand the position of all levels of perimeters and position line centers of security panels. Really protect yourself in the 24, 48, 72, 144 traction. Puts all communication lines as center of operation surface and specifications to your system. Omega X. Putting line calculation lines infinity 8. Setting track lines in setting line interference in 6 and 9 in track location. Direct lines of modification. Okay, all lines of communications, indirect signals, but it's a continuous force in line calculation setting, right? See the coloration? See? So what's the coloration lines? It's false, truth, all right? False and truth, okay? False narrative is the formation line screen, the coloration line screen interference, and position of your flux, sets lines of communication setting to travel. Setting position line calculation setting and position location system. You guessed it, face recognition. Okay. So if you get in a track line communication center, how you guys have to understand your line connection, your flux. What is your flux? What does that look like? What is the flux? It's a face, guys. Okay. Correlation track lines. What is the ground lines of the earth? There you go. Now you know what the flux is, right? Flux is everything in information structure line division. These are point lines of tracks of travel. 3 calculation line interference. What is your position location in your cloud? Is the light bulb. Formation location, intelligence and frame. Okay, direct calculation line interference, travel lines, throw communication setting, travel communication to point centers of tracks, all calculated, modify, and track communication setting in line conditions. Browse adapters, travel calculation point center. Oh my goodness, this is starting to make a lot more sense. Setting track calculation high position location line centers, 1 line center high interference, and 1 in position of 2. That's where it comes in the antenna. All right, setting correlation track lines and satellites and Wi-Fi position of travel communication to point centers, all through set locations. So this is a mainframe of a face, right? But this is the future frame of you, right? This is the outer frame of space. Inner frame, outer frame. Inner frame, outer frame, right? So this is you in existence. This is you in the future of existence. You see how that works in set locations? And this is you in box frame. Okay, that's you in box frame. Oh, we traveled over here. 2 travels. Oh, we travel over here. Whoa, 3 of us. 3 circle location centers face recognition. Whoa, look at that. Okay. So who is operating all this in travel? Here is operating everything through mainframe. Okay. Which is your sim. Okay. Yes, I know, McCall. Setting communication line screens is direct signal locations, how to use your antennas, your inhibitors, and set position of power over channel. correlate the calculation of stream interference to tracking line system and future adaptation. Sets of correlations, channels of communication, right? 3 modifications of U, 2 modifications of U, 1 modification of U through box frame. Okay? All right. So now you understand the settings, how it comes into location in your system. All set location of center calculations, right? Off through point tracks, line calculations, high center interference, and face recognition. Okay? You're always going to see me in a face recognition, everything I do, because that is the center correlation setting in position locations, in line connections, okay? A box frame. Okay? Getting position line centers in set location, now you know exactly what the flux capacitor is. Now you understand the Earth. This is the Earth. Okay? Earth, astral. See? This is the Earth plane. Okay? The astral plane. The I central line calculation setting is the triangulation line condition system. Okay? Which is, you guessed it, your soul plane. You see it? So it's always in U and setting. Always in set location. Always in set location. Always in set location. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys. So now you understand what the Earth plane is. Now you understand what the astral plane is. Earth, astral, soul. Earth, astral, soul. Got it? Good. All right. Getting position line center is really understanding you in set location. Pay attention to that, because that's what you're coming into March 1st. Okay? All right. So I think we're good on certain points of communication and settings, attractions, and all calculations of truth and levels of false narratives. Really understand the point lines attract in position to your transistors, resistors, your binaries, your retract line calculation setting to your primers, and line connections to your all line settings, your capacity, your capacitors, and your light switches to really understand the modification setting to travel. Point lines of 7, and line calculation equal lines of 1. Okay? So in line calculation setting, that's a 2-track location. Sets position line centers, high cross line screens, sets position operation surface. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. So in line calculation setting, that is a binary. Okay. So we take line calculations of 1, 2, 3, 4 equals communication of 1, 2, 3, 7 locations, right? So what do we do in track lines? 4 lines of setting, right? So 4 colorations, all right, which is all calculation of false, 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 false. Okay, center correlation to track lines and high interference equal locations into line center interference. A 3-track line calculation, position over provision. Setting correlation line centers in position 1 over lines of pi. Timestamp, time center in calculation of vortex, in calculation of line interference, jump start communication setting, in position of grounds, in calculation of its position of programs. Good calculation on lines, 4 falsity line rotation centers of travels and narratives, and set location line calculation setting 1 over pi. Sets position line calculation setting of false into false and truth in center calculation. Okay? All through 7 line calculation setting and 2-point track location. Okay? So you guys have to understand how it comes in position travels. If I go through 4 7s and travel, what does it come into? What does it come into? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 mainframes of files in set location. Okay? So you really have to understand how this all works in formation of grounds. The correlation setting and travel calculate position of point centers is understanding you through flux of communication. Understanding your Earth, understand your astrals, and understand your soul identification. That is the correlation line centers. That is the magnetic highway of its information. That's your Omni highway communication of data. The process of the I-line centers changes all communication setting in position location in your system into infinity line communication of 69 equals 8. See the 8 line centers in set location? See the line connection of 6 and 9 in travel? Do you have some modification, screen interference, travel position of point centers of traction? right? So how does everybody feel about that now? Now you understand why it's so important, what the flux is and what it means. Try to identify yourself, not just from the inside line. Try to identify yourself from the outline connections, right? So in position, the inner line setting is the truth narrative. The outline is the false, okay? The false line is the formation. The formation, the configuration is your body, okay? Formation equals body, okay? So truth narratives is location equals the sim, okay? That's the truth narrative. And the false narrative is the body, right? Which is the configuration, which is the teleportation that you have to understand through track locations, understanding you through modification. Understanding you through consoles is understanding you in all calculation. Okay? So, how does everybody feel about that? It's exciting, isn't it? What we're coming into. But I just wanted to show you how powerful it is to actually see yourself in all formation locations of intelligence of frames through face recognition. There's always going to be a face on everything that you do through structured design, right? So that's how you have to get into the primer. You are the primer, okay? So the inline setting is the truth narrative. You are the teleportation vessel. That's the truth. The false narrative is the outline setting, which is your simulator, which is your body, that you have to understand how it works, information, okay? So in that correlation lines, attract lines, you understand more levels of you and traction. To understand that through communication, put you all levels of applications, okay? Of everything that you do, information, okay? Teleportation equals formation of a coloration line screen interference into configuration, which is face recognition in flux capacitor. Now you understand what the flux is. It's simple, it's easy, it's done. Face recognition. Okay? This is you in face recognition. Okay? Mainframe. Future of sim frame. Okay? Try to understand all this and how it works, people. So what you're doing is basically you're vortexing in setting every second, every minute, every hour of you. But you have to understand you through your truth narratives and your false narratives before you get anything in set line connects to its position of its program location of existence that puts all levels of operation system, all calculation modification of 6 and 9 interactions of formation. Intelligence, see? There's intelligence there, see? There's the eye right there. Boom. Now the eye moved, see? I got one here. See, look. Another intelligence, see? There's one there, there's one there, there's one there, right? Look. 3 face recognition settings. 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Look, here's the neck. Okay, now you understand the importance, how it is in position locations, how you come all levels of face recognition location in your setting to travel. Hoo-ah! Okay? All right. The files of communication line setting, let's go into square root setting, face line, right? Now, face line is just front. You can't see the back, you just see the front. You can't see the side or other side locations, you can't see the grounds, right? So all you see is the front. So in that calculation line system, you have to understand how to travel in mechanism line settings at 3 set locations. Once you get into that, you get a position of triangulation, okay? So that puts the lines of 4 equals lines of 3, set location of 7, right? So I get 4 tracks, 24, 48, 72, 144. Set at the platform in communication setting and travel through it in set line connections, set point centers of tracks. Okay? So that's how you create a platform. Now, creating a platform is very powerful stuff because it positions your settings into a hologram structure of pi in track location. Okay? That's how you have to start seeing your line calculation setting in position you stand on the platforms. Okay, you are on the platforms, right? So you're going through false and you're going through truth narratives and set locations. All right, so you go from here, right? And then you go here, and then you go through. Okay? So this is your Earth and set line connections. This is your positions to your astral, and this is your connection to your soul. Okay? So, really get into that lines and start to see your face as line connections. Earth, astral, soul. Okay? Your soul identifies line settings to the core, but the position lines of travel is to understand you through navigation, through the mind, through the heart, through the soul of light, and through the travel and position of body of consciousness. So in position location is really understanding how to calculate that setting. Coloration, formation of transformation is transisting, transmitting, and receiving information. Okay? Transmitting and receiving. Okay? So what is that correlations of interactions? Remember, you're coming out of the white sands of snowy graph interference. You're coming to coloration line screens now and pixelation line positions, right? There's colorations on your TV. It's not black and white anymore. We're in a different communication of the air. We're in a triangulation line of existence of the now. So we're out of black and white. But the position of perception is the light shades and shadows of yin and yang. That process is all communication setting. Now, you've probably seen that already in adaptation of yin and yang at different colors. That's what you're coming in through all calculations that precedes your location and perceptions over consciousness that puts you all levels of awareness of what you're seeing in track location. Your eye receptor line screens high calculation, high position, all levels of operation to your clouds of division. Okay? So it's really interesting when you start to see that through formations. Knowing the body is the false narratives, and knowing exactly the inside of you is the inner calculation setting, which is the truth narrative. You understand that? So it's bringing the truth and the false together into one cycle that puts position to all levels of calculations. It's a process of yin and yang on a continuous force in all calculation lines of existent locations to its setting of travel calculation mechanisms of overcharge, overpower, over mechanism. Puts position line centers in your position line tractions in all calculating modified and center of operation of face recognition. Okay? So in that position line calculation setting, transmitting and receiving. What is transmitting? Is it truth narrative or is it false narrative? Remember, you're connecting to a network setting. You're connecting through light and you're connecting through dark, which is yin and yang. The process to really understand the colorations of matrix, new grid lines, new formation settings, high interference, high track locations, electrical light divisions, electrical light panels, position travels, computer operation service, track location setting, eye receptor calculation. Now, in that track line, in its communication system, the actual line connection setting to your transmitting, okay, is false, okay, because it's the dark web, guys. All right, so false equals location lines of dark. Okay, so it doesn't have a setting yet. It doesn't have a tether yet, but it's there in its equation. So it's about you understanding the truth narrative and the false narrative you first. To understand that, then you come into false and truth narrative. Then you understand how to direct and redirect. You're good to go. Keep going, keep going, keep going. So you understand the position location that the false narrative is the line connection of space. And the truth narrative is the inner cycles of you. Okay, which is the power of you, which is the operation of you, which is the compute setting calculation line, set of operation calculation line interference of you. Okay, it's the inner charge, it's the outer charge. Inner realm, outer realm, inner space, outer space, inner norm, out of norm. Okay, inner limits, outer limits. Okay, inner vibe, outer vibe. So it's all calculated and modified through what? Positive and negative. Okay? So now you understand what that means in fractions through transmitting and receiving. Okay? False, truth, right? So receiving is the truth. So you have to identify what that means. What does that mean when I get that setting? How do I understand that through adaptation, right? Break it down in files. Break it down in files. Okay? Getting position track lines, break it down in files. Okay? That's what you guys have to understand. In all calculation, all settings, in position, location, all track line connections, understanding the truth and the false and the false and the false and the truth and the false and false truth, false truth. So it's a different vibration, right? That's what it is. You got to get in information locations, understanding the truth narratives and the false narratives of you, of space and time. Hoo-ah! We're done. That was fun. Obviously, you guys have a lot of questions. All right. So it's miraculous knowing exactly how to get in your settings and set locations, how to put it all together through primers of calculation. Adios.